I'm super excited to be here. Lovely faces in the room. Hello to everybody who's watching us hybrid, virtual, wherever you are. Welcome to our breakout session. We're going to be talking about how do you secure the use of AI. I'm going to be joined by two amazing colleagues, Ashish and Douglas, in a little bit, who are going to walk you through some amazing demos. So let's get started. The next 44 minutes that we have together, we're going to cover the security challenges in the generative AI landscape. We'll look at how Microsoft Security Solutions can help you with some really, really cool demos. So this slide should not be new. I think you've seen this in keynotes. You've seen this in several other sessions. I think we all know generative AI is here. We are using it day in, day out. And we are really living in an AI-first world. And AI has so much potential. We've been talking about it for 2 days now. But it's real. Like, how many of you have used it and actually gotten productivity gains? I know I do all the time. But with that also comes data security, compliance, privacy risks. If you heard the keynote earlier today with Charlie and Vasu, they talked about it. If you attended the Purview session earlier today, Hiren and Rudra talked about it a little bit. So let's double click into that. So what we are seeing is, because of lack of controls in how you can protect data as your users use generative AI, organizations are outright banning it. Not good, right? Because then your users can't get all of the benefits that we talked about. So you need to have an approach that can help your users be productive while you can maintain all of the protections. So we've been talking about this with customers for a long time now. With especially generative AI, the challenges have kind of grouped into 3 main categories that we hear. So let me walk you through them. Rise of shadow AI. So there are so many different types of generative AIs out there that your users might be using today. The biggest challenge here is understanding what those apps are, because it feels like new ones keep popping up. And not knowing how your users are using them, not knowing what data is flowing into it, what's coming out of it. If you don't have that visibility, you can't really protect your data. Which brings me to my next point up here, which is around lack of controls in making sure what's going into the AI is secure, as well as what's coming out of the AI is secure. So AI is, of course, a new technology that creates new type of content. It's able to analyze large amounts of data. It's able to summarize it really quickly. But if you think about it, the output needs to be protected like you protect any other data in your organization. And then the third one here is around increased regulatory pressure. So there are so many conversations around needing AI-specific regulation, which we are not there yet. But while we get there, we also need to make sure that the generative AI that we are using today complies with existing laws and regulations. So while you're using it, you need to make sure it's still being HIPAA compliant or GDPR compliant and following AI ethics principles. So there's a huge role that compliance plays here. So now, with that frame in mind, so we talked about challenges. How do organizations get ahead of it? We recommend a 3-step approach, starting with discover. So you need to be able to discover the generative AI in your applications. You need to understand their associated risks. So is a certain app more risky than the other? Once you've understood that, then comes protection, right? You need to, with the visibility that you get in the first pillar here, you can then start to see things like, maybe a very high-risk user in my organization is using generative AIs in ways which they shouldn't be using. So that allows you to put proactive controls in place. What I mean by proactive controls is that you're not reacting to data loss in your environment anymore. You're making sure that it doesn't happen in the first place, right? And we'll see how we can help you with that. And then after protection comes regulations and compliance. So you need to make sure you have policies in place, and the generative AI that you're using in your organization, you're able to audit those interactions. You're able to store that data for as long as you might a law or regulation in your jurisdiction might require. So keep this frame in mind, because we're going to be coming back to this throughout the entire next 40 minutes. All right, so this is where Microsoft Security really shines. We have years of experience, proven track record to help you secure and govern your apps and your data. And today, I'm thrilled to share that we are actually advancing that to cover your AI data. And not just Microsoft AI data. What you see here is our vision to protect any and all AI data. Starting with Microsoft Copilots, we are starting our journey with Copilot for Microsoft 365. We will also protect AI that you might build for your organization for a very specific need. Everybody will have different use cases and different requirements, as well as thousands of consumer AI that might exist. So across all of this, how do you make sure that your data stays protected and you're not losing your sensitive business confidential information? Let's walk through an example. So our friend Alex here, she is a finance director at Contoso, and she is preparing for a meeting with her CEO. That's a tough one, to talk about her Q4 financial projections. She has this information across multiple different documents. Some of them are Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, and she needs to pull all of this together in a way that makes sense, and then she can share it in the meeting. She's pressed for time, so she realizes that her friend mentioned a generative AI, let's call it Foo.ai, to her that could do exactly this. And she thinks, why not give it a try? So she uses Foo.ai, puts in all of the information in there. AI does its thing. Outcomes, recommendation, insights, she takes them to the meeting. The meeting goes great. She's really happy. But what she does not realize is she's actually put Contoso at a little bit of a risk here, or maybe a lot, because all of that financial information that she put in the AI, which was risky, is now out there. Contoso realizes that, and then they block that AI application, which means our friend Alex and all of Contoso's colleagues are no longer able to reap all of the benefits that we talked about. Also, keep this example in mind, because we will come back to it to show you how Microsoft Security can help. So we've talked a lot about generative AI applications. One thing that I want to share is these AI applications are on this wide spectrum. What you're seeing here is they can range all the way from Microsoft Copilots, which are built on our comprehensive framework of privacy, security, compliance, and responsible AI. So they are inherently secure and compliant. But there could be AI applications, consumer AI applications, they are not enterprise ready, might not have MFA, might not comply with HIPAA, GDPR. Those organizations pose a big risk to your, those applications, pose a big risk to your organization as well as your data. So across this spectrum, you have to make sure that you have different protection controls. It's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. And across this spectrum, you need to discover, protect, comply, bringing back to the 3 principles of our framework that we talked about just a minute ago. So with that, let's take a look at how Microsoft Security can help you discover and protect data in consumer AIs. And to do this, please welcome Douglas.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us in person, and if you're remote, thank you for watching. My name is Douglas Santos. I'm a senior product manager in the Microsoft Security CXC division, focused on Defender for Cloud Apps. And I'm here today to talk about some of the features that Defender for Cloud Apps can be used, specifically in the context of helping you discover these generative AI applications. So if you're new to Defender for Cloud Apps, Defender for Cloud Apps is an incredible solution that's focused on SaaS security. It's a comprehensive SaaS security solution that can be used for many things, including providing capabilities around SaaS security posture management, threat protection for cloud applications, information protection, and DLP for cloud applications, secure access to applications, app governance, and many more. But the focus of today is really talking about one of the key pillars of Defender for Cloud Apps, that is a cloud discovery. So you may have seen in this morning's keynote with Vasu and Charlie Bell that they announced that Defender for Cloud Apps can now have the ability to detect over 400 different generative AI applications. And we have a new category of AI apps called generative AI apps that can be used to understand these applications a little bit more. So let me jump right into the demo and show you how that looks in real life. So I'll start with the security portal, where Defender for Cloud Apps is now a part of the security portal. And I'll click on the Cloud App Catalog and look at the generative AI category. So you can see right off the bat, right now we have a bit over 413 applications, but this number is always growing, and this is just the beginning. So when I click on generative AI, it's going to filter based on that particular category. So let me just make a bit more real estate here so you can see this better. And one of the things that you'll notice is that besides the list of the applications that you have available here, you have a risk score profile for each one of those applications. So like Shilpa explained before, some applications are different than others. Some are more secure, others are not so much. So if you look at one of these applications, for example, you can expand and have a look at the risk profile of this application, from security controls that this application supports or may not support, to compliance regulations and certifications that we and our analysts found out that this application is green, it's compliant with HIPAA, GDPR, and many other compliance and regulations. But let me take a look at an application that may not be so great in terms of risk profile. So here on the top, you can lower the bar and filter based on risk score. And risk score, in this case, it varies from 0 to 10. And the lower the risk score, the higher the risk for the application. So if I look at the first app that pops up here, and I take a look at the same characteristics of the application, you can see that the application doesn't have a lot of security controls or is not compliant with many compliance and regulations, and from a legal standpoint, it's not that great as well. So what else can I do here? I can create a policy from this search, give the policy a name, and then decide action to put some governance around these applications. So when we talk about discover, protect, and understand the usage of AI, that's the first step. It's really to start to map and monitor the usage of these applications in your organization. So in this case, I could click tag as monitor in this application from now on, or you could also use like a custom tag if you want to have a different tag. And now this application will show up in reports, and depending on your setup, it also may impact the user experience, particularly the monitor for end users that are using the integration with Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Cloud Apps. The user will see a page that they can click through to continue to use the application. So let me switch gears, leave this page, and go back into Defender for Cloud Apps portal. And instead of going to Cloud App Catalog, now I'm going to go to Cloud Discovery. And Cloud Discovery is very interesting because the dashboard will show you the real-life use cases for users that are using these applications in several categories. So let's dive into the Discover apps and have a look at, again, generative AI. And in this case, I am just interested in understanding the usage of generative AI. And important to notice that this data that's being ingested by Defender for Cloud Apps can be coming directly from Defender for Endpoint with that integration that with one click you have everything automatically wired, and the telemetry from the endpoints are coming into Defender for Cloud Apps. But we also have partnerships with other vendors, and you can also bring like firewall logs, proxy logs into Defender for Cloud Apps, so you have this visibility. So what is different in the Cloud Discovery Portal is that you can now see telemetry that is associated to those applications. Very simple example here is that I can take a look at Adobe Firefly, and I can double-click on that. And then again, I have the visual of the app risk score, a dashboard of basically usage and usage trend. I can go back and look at the risk profile and double-click on the app usage itself and see how many users are using this application, the traffic per user, IP address, and more. Now, let me go back there to the Cloud Discovery, and again, just highlight that this is an example where I have users that are using some applications that may be okay to use, but depending on the organization, they may want to look at these applications that are a bit more risky, like the ones that you see below.
Douglas?
Yes?
Quick question for you. As I'm following your demo here on our screen, this is great. Can we protect these applications? Like, can we say, hey, you're not supposed to use this one because it's risky?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are different layers. Like the first step, like I said, is discovery. So you apply discovery and then understand basically the risk profile that you have on all these applications. The next step is maybe for the risky applications, I want to start to block them. So the way you do that with Defender for Cloud Apps is by tagging the application as unsanctioned. So I'll just tag a few here so you can see that on the screen. I did that for Copy AI. Brainwork is already blocked. I can block this Vance AI as well. And what will happen, again, if you have the integration with Defender for Endpoint, that is going to flow back into Defender for Endpoint and block the user from accessing that application at the endpoint layer. But again, we have integrations with other third party that same enforcement can be done on the endpoint. So let me show you how that looks on the endpoint side. So here I have the user Alex that was regularly using a lot of these generative AI applications. And because now IT decided that these risky applications, they are not okay to use, some of them were tagged as monitored. And the experience for the user, for example, this is an application that I had previously set as monitor, is that the user sees a block page, but the user can click to allow, so the user can click through and continue to use the application. But other applications, like Brainwork, for example, that was blocked, the user won't have the option to click through, so the application is blocked in period. And while that's happening, I can also have, of course, some applications that are considered okay to use or sanctioned. For example, I can go in to Google Bard, or I can go into Microsoft Copilot, and that will be okay. I clicked on the wrong one. Yeah, Google Bard, Bing Chat, that's okay.
Douglas, this is great. So if we had this, we could protect users from actually using risky apps. Let me ask you another question, because we talk about balancing protection and productivity a lot. Like, that's a key core principle. Can we do that? Can we prevent users from just copying sensitive information? Like, I could use generative AI, but as long as I'm not compromising my organization's data.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because like I said, when you start the journey and you discover and then you start implementing this policy, maybe some applications you want to block, but others, maybe it's okay to use, but you want to do exactly what you just said. I want to maybe control and block just the usage of sensitive information in these cloud applications. So that is possible as well. Let me jump into the VM here. And for example, I have a document that's open. And in this case, I have a secret project. It's a very sensitive information in the organization, a product that we're working very, very hard, and we don't want this to leak. So what I have in my environment is a DLP policy that's provided through Purview that is looking for this particular, it could be any sensitive information type. It could be a credit card number, social security numbers, but it could also be something like a keyword. And in this case, if I copy this content and I put it or try to put it into Google Bard, for example, I'll try to paste it. What I'll see is that the paste of that information in the prompt is blocked. But at the same time, I'm selective, which means that maybe for Microsoft Copilot or even on the Microsoft chat, I can copy this information and paste it here, if I can find the paste. Oh, there it is. I was clicking on the wrong place. And then I can paste on a sanctioned application that's more secure.
Awesome.
Well, that wraps up with my demo. Thank you very much. I'm hoping to talk to you, in the corridors or on the booth.
Thank you, Douglas. That was really cool, huh? Seeing all of that live, being able to block applications. Remember our friend Alex, who was trying to put financial information into a risky AI application? Let's go back to Alex now. So the scenario remains the same. She's still trying to prepare for that meeting. She's now even more pressed on time. So she tries to put the same information on what we were calling foo.ai, but now Contoso is using Defender for Cloud Apps. So Contoso is able to very quickly say, hey, foo.ai is not safe, the risk score is really low, and they have already unsanctioned that app, which means Alex, at this point, is not able to use that app, therefore saving Contoso from their sensitive information being leaked. Now, here's the twist. Contoso uses Microsoft 365 Copilot. So as Douglas showed us, you can still maintain productivity. You can still work with generative AI in a very secure way. So let's see what Alex's journey would look like in Microsoft 365 Copilot. And for that, I will ask Ashish to come up and show us how Alex would do it.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Shilpa. Thanks. All right, let's set this up. Okay, so we are going to spend our time now talking about Alex's journey in the Copilot land. And we are going to talk about how Alex can be secure and compliant, but we are also going to show how this discovery bubbles up to the administrator of the organization, Contoso. All right, let's jump in. I'm going to do a slight setup. We already covered a bit of this, but I'm going to do a bunch of demos, so let's make sure we are grounded in what the demo setup is. We're going to still live in the land of Contoso, and we're going to talk about the experience of Copilot for two users. Alex, of course, the one that we have been talking about, but I'm going to introduce a new person here, Diego. Now, Diego doesn't have the same level of access that Alex has. Specifically, the secret project that we talked about, Obsidian, that Douglas showed us, well, Diego doesn't have access to that at all. So there is going to be SharePoint data that we're going to reference, and this data Diego doesn't have access to, Alex does. And we're going to show how this Copilot experience shows up for these two different users. I'm going to use Word as the example here. On the administrator side, we're going to look at two different sets of controls. One are protection controls around labels, classifiers, and more. And then are all the compliance controls we have made available. All useful things if you're a regulated customer. All right, let's jump into the demo and see how that works. Okay, so I'm going to start exactly where Douglas left off. I'm going to start with Alex, who is, let's give it a sec. Okay, this is Alex. Yes, this is Alex. So Alex is back at work after a while, needs to catch up on what is going on. So let's use that time to, let's use Copilot to find out what's going on here. So I'm going to ask the question, what are the important documents in Project Obsidian? Remember, Alex has access to Project Obsidian, right? So let's hit enter. Hopefully the demo gods are with us today and everything just works. Copilot is going to do its thing, look for documents, look at all the SharePoint sites that Alex has access to. And this is going to be, yes, it works. Good. Okay. All right. This is great. This is Copilot doing its thing. But this session is about the data security, compliance, and all of that stuff. So where does that show up? Let's look at the places in which Purview has done an amazing job just extending over to Copilot everything that you already know and love. Number one, as you look at the files that are being referenced here, in the citation, you will see the label of the file show up front and center. And this I'm going to emphasize again and again in the rest of my demo. Sensitivity labels are super important to your organization. make sure you start your journey on that right now. If you are thinking about using Copilot, sensitivity labels are going to play a major role in how we secure data for you on your behalf. So please do get started on that journey. Number two, where we do a great job, as you look at the references that Copilot shows you, each file in there, again, the sensitivity label shows up. The goal here is to make sure that your users do the right thing. By putting this information in front of your users, we teach them to look at the sensitivity of the data, handle your data in the right way. Of course, you can only go so far in trusting your users. So I'm going to talk about the third place where this shows up, the chat itself. The sensitivity of the chat itself is confidential Project Obsidian. Where did this come from? From all the files that you have referenced and Copilot uses, it picks the most restrictive sensitive label and puts it on the chat. And this makes sure that this chat itself, treated as its own sensitive data, gets its sensitivity label. Again, 3 places in one output that we are focusing on from a data security point of view. Very, very important. All right, but this is just Alex getting started. What happens when Alex goes deeper? Before we go in deeper, let me show you some of the admin configurations that have been done in order to keep your user Alex more secure. So let me switch over to the admin for a second. And the admin starts their journey in the Purview Compliance portal, compliance.microsoft.com. And there are 2 things that I'm going to cover here: how you detect sensitive information and how you protect it using auto-labeling and more. So the first thing is, if you go to classifiers, I have set up a special classifier here called sensitive terms, special to my organization. And this classifier says, I'm going to look for the catchphrase Obsidian. Wherever I find this, I'm going to treat that document, that email, that content as sensitive, and I'm going to do something about it. So this is just for the demo. Obsidian is the keyword. It's the same thing that Douglas was using. We're going to latch on to that, defined in the Purview portal. The second thing that I'm going to focus your attention on is the label. Remember I mentioned that there is sensitive data in SharePoint. Some of those documents are labeled with this special label, Confidential Project Obsidian. Let's dig in for a second to see how that is going. Open that up. The first thing that I want you to notice is that it has a color. This color is going to show up. It showed up in the chat that you saw, that yellow shield icon had a yellow color. Yes, that one comes from the label setting in there. The next thing that I want to point out is that there is encryption applied on this. Now, encryption ensures that your data is secure wherever it travels. But in the context of Copilot, these permissions that you define ensure that whoever does not have access to this encrypted content will not get access through Copilot. So if you are not allowed to access encrypted content outside of Copilot, you won't be able to access it through Copilot too. So these permissions, along with SharePoint permissions, are all part of the grounding that we have done to make sure your data is correctly accessed. So use labels and use encryption correctly to ensure access control on your data is in place. The third thing that I'm going to talk about here is auto-labeling. This is where, as your users are being productive, they're just going to see the right things happen in terms of sensitivity labels apply to their data. So I'm going to use the sensitive terms that I've defined as Obsidian. And I'm going to say, if you find this as you are working with your documents and emails, you should apply this label automatically. Right? So this is your administrator setting. Let's see how this shows up for the user as they're working through it.
Ashish, does the user have to do anything?
And we will see that the user doesn't have to do anything. Let's switch over. Okay, so I'm going to hop into Word. This was the document that Douglas was using. I'm going to start fresh. All right, I'm going to first show you how any sensitivity label that you are using and working with just happens to naturally work with Copilot. So I'm going to start by referencing a file and seeing how that works. So using G. All right, I'm going to use this file. And I'm going to pause here to show you that as soon as I reference the file, a little shield icon appeared there. And that is the color of the sensitivity label, instantly showing you that sensitivity labels are there for your users to understand as they work with documents. The question hasn't even completed, but we are telling your users this is going to be sensitive data that you're going to be using with Copilot. FAQ. Okay, so this is the question I'm going to do. I'm going to understand what I'm going to write in my product FAQ outside there. I have an entire product spec. Summarize it for me. So again, hopefully this works. So as Copilot does its thing, and as soon as Copilot starts generating data, you will see something happen to this label, currently general, and there we go. So as soon as the content got referenced, remember that the Copilot output is based on sensitive content that's input. And so we want to make sure that whatever protections that you had in place on the input carry over through to the output. So as soon as that output started generating, your sensitivity label on this document that you're working on moved from general to confidential. This is important. This is the same sensitivity label that was on the input. Again, teaching your users to do the right thing is going to be the shield icon that appears that tells you the sensitivity label of the document that you're working on. You're going to see this all over the place, so I'm going to keep hammering this. The way that you do data sensitivity labels, the way you do your classifications, and the way you handle purview is going to be everything in terms of how you protect your data as you use AI applications, especially Copilot. Okay, this was example one. We inherit the label from the source to the destination. Let's take another example and see what happens. This time I'm not going to reference a document. Can Purview actually protect me as I use Copilot? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate again an FAQ for Project Obsidian. Let's see what happens. Okay. Hopefully this works. All right, there we go. So Copilot is doing its thing. It's searching through the data. It's going to find out something about Project Obsidian, and it's going to start putting the content in there. No file was referenced in this case, so there's no inheritance. But we had auto-labeling set up, which looked for the keyword Obsidian anywhere in the content that you're working on. And you can see that a nice little policy tip appears that says, sensitive information was detected here, and your data has automatically been labeled to confidential Project Obsidian. This is the second way that we keep your data safe without the user doing anything. And this is important. As you do the right things with your Purview configuration, your data is going to be safe and secure. Now, for a second, let me switch over to this user called Diego. Now, Diego, remember, does not have access to the Project Obsidian site. And, well, you know, water cooler talk does happen, and you talk about things like this on the water cooler. Someone hears you and like, let's find out what Project Obsidian is about. So I'm going to have Diego ask Copilot this question. Hopefully Copilot will do the right thing. Let's see. Okay, hang on. Let's put the cursor back here. I know nothing about it, so I'm going to ask the question. Now, if Copilot's grounding has been done correctly, based on the user's access to the SharePoint site, based on the sensitivity labels that they have access to, Copilot will basically say, you don't have access to anything at all. This is it. So you can see the difference in the experience that Alex has versus what Diego has. This is important. This is what you're most worried about, right? You want Copilot to share the right level of data with the right user, right? And we have shown here that if you do it correctly, you won't leak information through Copilot. All right, so we have seen what protection aspects happen here. Let's quickly switch over to see the admin experience on compliance with everything that is going on. And the first thing that matters here is audit. As the administrator, I want to know what is going on in my tenant. And we have done a great job of plumbing all these Copilot interactions and chats that are there into Purview Audit. And as you can see, everything that the user is doing shows up here. The operation, as you want to search for, is called Copilot interaction. You can see that the user is Alex. And you can see that there are certain files that were referenced as a part of it, along with the sensitivity label of those files. So again, as you funnel this audit data to a SIEM and you want to start doing investigations, this is a great place to start. You can start to look for which interactions had sensitive information associated and then filter based on that. Most importantly, this audit record does not have the actual content of the interaction. That's customer content, that's yours. You don't want it funneling out into a SIEM and going somewhere else. So a reference to that document is there in the audit record, but the actual data is not. And this is what you'll find. This is the reference to that chat content that your users interacted with. So this is audit. This is the start point for understanding what is going on. But now you want to dive deeper into what Alex really has been up to. So let's use eDiscovery. I'm going to start a case. I'm going to call it Copilot Data Spillage. And I'm going to investigate what Alex has been up to. All the right the compliance value that you're looking for if you're a regulated FSI, energy kind of customer. As you dig into this, you create a review set. I've created a review set a while back for Alex, and I'm going to dig into that. And you can see all the conversations that Alex has been having. And you can see, clicking on this, the question that was asked and the response that comes. So you know exactly what is going on. And this is the kind of stuff that is going to help you comply to certain regulations and requests as you need it. The same kind of thing is used within communications compliance, flagging you for conversations that you should not be having. If your users are doing such a thing and you want to know what's going on, this is the way to do it. So if you dig into this, actually within communications compliance, I'm looking for, I have a policy that looks for Obsidian as the keyword. Again, I'm flagging anything that I think is sensitive to my organization, and I've got this, and I'm looking at all these conversations that are going on, and I know exactly that my tools are doing the right thing for me. And of course, because we are able to store this data in a compliant storage, we are able to run eDiscovery, we are able to run communications compliance on top of it. But now that it is being stored, you need to have the right data retention policies on top. So data retention also extends to Copilot interaction. So you can see I have like a policy already set up that extends my retention policy today, 5 years, as it's mentioned, from Copilot, from Teams chats all the way to Copilot interactions. So all these things are just the right set of policies in place for you to get started with Copilot in a great and compliant way. I hope this was useful.
And Ashish, are these all built behind strong RBAC?
These are all built behind strong RBAC. Everything that you know and understand and have implemented with Purview all apply exactly the way they are.
So you need special permissions to be seeing some of the content that was
Exactly. Yes. Now we have covered protection. We have covered compliance. Let's get to discovery. Now we talked about app discovery with Douglas, but I'm going to do something very interesting. Let's switch over to the slides. All right. So let's announce AI Hub within Purview. This is the place that you should be going to understand everything related to sensitive data within your organizations. So starting with what activity is going on in Copilot to what activity is going on outside of Copilot in all the consumer AI apps that you might be using, and then working that into a place where you look at what sensitive data is there, because that's where the risk starts to show up for your organization. Going deep into that and giving you an AI-specific view of this is something that will really help you on your AI journey. We're going one step further and layering on the risk of the user on top of all these interactions. So this is where you start to understand, as you go on your AI journey, how we in Microsoft Security are going to help you with your data, with your users and how that ties together to generate the risk and how do you help contain that risk overall. If you want to dive into details of how this shows up, we have an, again, AI-specific view of the Activity Explorer that you already use within Purview, looking at activities that are specific to users doing interactions with not just Copilot, but any third-party AI app that is there. And again, an interface that is familiar to you, well understood, but just AI-specific. This extends one step more with policies that are AI-specific. Again, our goal is to help you on this AI journey, focusing your attention to places that actually matter. And these policies will help you do exactly the right things that you need to get you started with AI. Set the right policies to keep your data safe, set the right policies to keep your apps safe, and this is how we are going to overall help you along in your journey here. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, I think we should give a big hand to Ashish and Douglas. It takes so much courage to do Copilot demos live, and they just crushed it. Okay, so bringing it home for us, what is available today? Anchoring back on our 3 principles of our framework: discover, protect, comply. Anchoring on 2 products that you saw today, Defender for Cloud Apps and Microsoft Purview. In discovery, Douglas showed us how you can discover all of the consumer generative AIs in your organization, their associated risk, how you can sanction, unsanction them. Ashish showed us how you can take that a step further and then understand your AI activity, sensitive data that's flowing into the AI, and how your users might be interacting with AI. Let's come to protection. Douglas showed us how you can actually block your users from accessing generative AIs that might not be safe because they are not secure, they're not compliant. He also showed us how you can start to fine-tune some of those controls, where you can prevent your users from just putting in sensitive information, but if they are not working with any sensitive information, they can use the AI. So balancing protection with productivity. Ashish showed us how protection carries forward throughout Copilot, from document input to output, how we can do auto-labeling policies. And then lastly, we saw how Purview can help you manage compliance for Microsoft 365 Copilot. So how do you get started today? The first step, of course, aligning with our framework, is discover. Discover the generative AI applications that your users are using in your organization today. Leverage AI Hub to start gaining those insights, because with good insights, you can build better, relevant, informed protections in place. Which brings me to my next point here, which is about protection. Create an endpoint DLP policy that is designed to look for the information that you really care about and you don't want it leaking the environment. And third, if Ashish hasn't said it enough, if you were ever considering labeling your document, now is the time to do it. There are a couple resources here. Check out our blog, which goes into details on all of these capabilities, everything that's available to you today. We have a couple of breakout sessions and on-demand sessions on this topic, so I hope you'll check all of that out. Thank you so much for spending 45 minutes with us, and let's build a safer world together. Thank you.